All right, it is up. Thank you for joining me for the next 3 chapters of Bioshock's Rapture by John Shirley, the novelization that goes alongside the video games. Right. So we're in Chapter 3. Ryan Building, New York City, 1946. I'm just going to roll right into it. 10 a.m., and Bill McDonough wanted a cigarette. He had a pack of smokes calling to him from his jacket pocket, but he held off. He was right bloody nervous about this meeting with Andrew Ryan. He was sitting literally on the edge of the padded velvet waiting room chair outside the door of Ryan's office, trying to relax, his report on the tunnel in a big brown envelope on his lap. Bill glanced at Elaine, working diligently at her desk, a sturdy brunette in a gray-blue dress suit. She was about 29, a self-contained woman with happy blue eyes, and that upturned nose that reminded him of his mum. But the jiggle when she shifted in her seat, that sure wasn't like his bony old mum. He'd watched Elaine walking about the office whenever he could do it discreetly. She had slightly wide shoulders and hips, long legs, one of those leggy American women like Mary Louise, but smarter, judging from the brief contact he'd had with her. Bet she liked to dance. Maybe this time he'd get up the nerve and ask her. Bill made himself sit back in the seat, suddenly feeling weary. He was still knackered from staying up past midnight supervising the night crew in the tunnel. But he was glad for the work. He was making far more money than he'd ever made before. He'd move up to a nicer flat on the west side of Manhattan after his first month working for Ryan, and he was thinking of buying a car. The work was sometimes like plumbing writ large, but the gigantic pipes in the tunnel project weighed tons. Maybe he should talk to Elaine. Ryan didn't respect a man without enterprise. Didn't matter what the enterprise was in. Bill cleared his throat. Slow day, isn't it, Elaine? She looked up as if surprised he was there. Oh, yes, it has been a bit slow. She looked at him, blushed again, bit her lip, and looked back at her paperwork. He was encouraged. If a woman blushed looking at you, that was a good sign. Things are slow, gotta make 'em brisker, I always say. And what's brisker than the jitterbug? She looked at him innocently. Jitterbug? Yeah, fancy a jitterbug sometime? I don't know what that accent was. You mean you'd like to go dancing? She glanced at the door to Ryan's inner office and lowered her voice. Well, I might. I mean, if Mr. Ryan doesn't, I'm not sure how he feels about employees who cut a rug. Bill grinned. All quite harmless. He cleared his throat again. Harmless. Ah, Bill, you're here. Andrew Ryan was at the door to the inner office. He seemed cheerful, almost ebullient. Right you are, sir, Bill mumbled. He got up, trying to catch Elaine's eye as he went. She was studiously back at work. I expect you've brought the report, Ryan said, looking at Bill's manila envelope. Good man. But I already know how it's going. Tell you what, let's skip the office meeting. You and I, Bill, if you're up to it, are going on a trip. Couple of stops, one in town and one far beyond town. We'll talk about it on the way. It was Bill's first ride in a limousine. A smooth, quiet ride, a world away from the traffic outside, but Bill felt out of his social depth. He only had a few meetings with Ryan since being hired. He'd been working mostly with contractors and sometimes with Greavy when the engineer was back from the North Atlantic. Only it had seemed Bill, like Greavy, came out to the site mostly to watch him. Like the boffin was trying to guess his weight. One time Greavy had brought a couple of bearded, scowling Irishmen in fancy suits to look him over. Brothers by the name of Daniel and Simon Wales. Greavy never did bother to explain what that was about. When you get a chance to take a deco at the figure, sir. The deco, Bill said. You'll see we're all caught up on the schedule and just about done. Ryan held up a hand to stop him, but he was smiling faintly. I'm not surprised that you're almost finished, Bill. In fact, the crew can finish without you at this point. That's why I hired you. I knew you'd do a good job. Greavy was testing you on this tunnel assignment, but I had you figured right all along. There's something else I need to know. Something far more important, Bill. Yes, sir? Bill waited, fascinated by the electric charge of sheer certainty that seemed to shimmer around Andrew Ryan. Ryan looked at him seriously. I need to know if you're ready to meet the greatest challenge of your life. Bill swallowed. Whatever Ryan had in mind, he had to be equal to it. Anything you want to throw at me, sir? I'll take it on. Bill, Ryan leaned forward, glancing at the chauffeur to make sure the window to the front seat was closed, and spoke in a low, urgent voice. Have you heard of something called the North Atlantic Project? Bill couldn't suppress a chuckle. Heard those 4 words and not a word more. They're all like monks with a vow of silence when I ask what it is. Yes, and for several good reasons. Reasons like the United States government, the OSS, British intelligence, Soviet intelligence. OSS, that's American spies, isn't it? When I was with the RAF, we'd get a report from those blokes from time to time. Right, Office of Strategic Services, he snorted. We run rings around them and the FBI, I can tell you. The bonhomie faded from his eyes, replaced by a hard glitter that was looking sharply at Bill. You fought in the war. Tell me a little about it. It wasn't something Bill liked to talk about any more than he had to. Not so much the fighting end, more like support. On-board radioman for the RAF. Never had to kill a man personally. 11 bombing missions over Germany. After I was wounded, they found me a place in the Royal Engineers. I think I've gone to an Australian accent. What the liked that better, got my schooling. Did you feel a great loyalty to the government you fought for? Bill sensed this was a key question. Wouldn't put it that way, sir. Wasn't loyal to the government. Never liked 'em. It wasn't who I was for. It was who I was against. I was against the bloody Nazis. The bastards bungin' flying bombs at London. Ryan nodded gravely. He made eye contact, and Bill felt the voltage of it. My feelings about loyalty, Ryan said carefully, are very particularized. I believe a man must be loyal to himself first, but I also look for men who believe what I believe. Men who believe it enough that they know that being loyal to me is being loyal to themselves. Men like you, I hope. Bill was moved. This man, one of the world's most powerful, was opening yet another door to him, and at the same time acknowledging him as an individual. Yes, sir, I believe I understand. Do you? Of course, I run a corporation. Come on. Of course, I run a corporation, and I ask for cooperation from people under me. But self-interest is at the root of cooperation, Bill. I intend to prove that self-interest oils the wheels of business, and that freedom from the tentacles of government, from the social shackles on science and technology and growth, will produce unstinting prosperity. I have envisioned a great social experiment. But, Bill, ask yourself, where can a social experiment on a large scale take place? Where in this world is there a place for men like us? My father and I fled the Bolsheviks, and where did we end up? This isn't the land of the free. It pretends to be. It's the land of the taxed, and it was his reluctance to pay taxes that put my father in jail. Every society is the same on the face of the earth these days. But, Bill, suppose it were possible, his voice pitched low, breathless, to leave the face of the earth. Just for a time, just for a century or two, until the fools have destroyed themselves with their Hiroshima bombs. Bill was flummoxed. Leave it, sir. Ryan chuckled. Don't look so astonished. I don't mean we're going to the moon. We're not going up. We're going down. Bill, I have something to show you. Will you take a trip with me to Iceland? Iceland? Just to the first leg. A plane to Iceland, then immediately a boat to the North Atlantic. I see the foundation, the beginning of the North Atlantic Project. I'm going to have to trust you, and you're going to have to trust me. Sir, Bill swallowed. He was not usually so open with people, but he was moved by Ryan's passion and his trust. You trusted me, Governor, right out of the Christmas cracker, and I'll trust you. Good. but you'll be giving me your point of view, Bill, because I feel you're trustworthy. We've reached our first stop. We'll have a few words with one of our resident artists here, and then we're taking a little late plane to see the North Atlantic project. I'm going to show you a marvel taking shape southwest of Iceland, and I promise that you will be enraptured. Driving a delivery truck later that night, Gorland spotted the small, discreet sign on the warehouse front. Seaworthy Construction. He drove around the corner and pulled up near the loading dock. Even this time of night, the place was a hive of activity. One shift clocking out, another one clocking in. Gorland turned off the engine and adjusted his stomach padding. Hiring a delivery truck was easy. Coming up with a new disguise had used up another hour. He got the delivery service coveralls, stuffed a pillow in them for a big belly, gave himself a scar, and rearranged the toupee. Most of all, he rearranged his facial expression, making it the expression of a bored wiseacre. A wise ass. "Hey, how you doing?" Gorland said to himself in the rearview mirror. He made the voice a little higher. He didn't want anyone recognizing Frank Gorland. "Hey, how you doing?" No, hey, how you doing? Hey, I got it. He was now Bill Foster, delivery driver, because Bill Foster happened to be the name sewn into the overalls. He looked over the clipboard that the driver of his borrowed truck had left on the dash. Heinz Canned Goods, it said. That'd work. The truck was empty. The stuff had already been delivered somewhere, but the warehouse didn't need to know that. Gorland climbed down from the truck and stalked over to the loading dock, acting like he was in a hurry to get the delivery over with. He went up the steps like he owned the place. Big steel doors into the warehouse were wide open, and inside a whole separate crew bustled and grunted about crates and pallets supporting intricate steel equipment, the likes of which he'd never seen before. A sign over the doors, bigger than the business sign out front, read, "Authorized personnel only." A grumpy-looking man in a long coat, horn-rimmed glasses, and a patch of a mustache was supervising a crew of 8 men offloading a truck backed to the loading dock, maybe the biggest truck Gorland had ever seen. Gorland watched for a minute as a hefty wooden crate was swung with a block and tackle, several men wrestling it into place on the wheeled pallet. Some of the other crates in the back of the truck looked big enough to hold a small car. Stenciled on one of the crates was "Design Facing Building 4. "You!" barked the man on the horn rims. He scowled, not seeming happy to find Gorland staring into the back of the big truck. "What do you want here?" Gorland meditatively chewed a wooden match and considered the question. Then he hooked a thumb at the truck he'd driven in here. "Got a delivery for Ryan." He flashed the clipboard he'd brought along. "Canned goods." The man turned to shout, "Careful with that!" And 2 burly workmen, then turned back to Gorland. "Canned goods? They'll be glad to hear that out of the sight. Second we get this truck unloaded, you back yours up here." "Hold on now," Gorland said, furiously chewing his toothpick. "This here delivery is for a man named Ryan. You him?" The man snorted in contempt. "Don't be a fool. Mr. Ryan doesn't come here in person. I'm Harry Brown. I sign for everything." Gorland shrugged and turned away. "Says here, Mr. Ryan, I don't have no other instructions." "Now wait a minute. Hold on." Brown stopped him with a hand on his shoulder. "They go through food out there like there's no tomorrow. We got the word from Rizzo yesterday that we had to step up on the canned goods." "Fine," Gorland said, chewing his match. "Then go get Mr." He paused to squint at his clipboard as if he was written on there. "Mr. Andrew Ryan out here to sign for it." "Look," Brown seemed to be working hard to hold on to his temper. "You know who Andrew Ryan is." "I heard of him. Some big muckety-muck. I don't care if he's Harry Truman. My instructions say he's got to sign or no delivery. Hell, I'll come back tomorrow. It's just a truckload of canned food." "We've got a ship coming in tonight, and they need those goods. They've got an army of men out there to feed." "So why don't they buy 'em something to eat local, wherever that is, till we get this straightened out?" Gorland asked, as if innocently amused. "They don't have a corner grocery store there?" "No, you tubby fool, if off the coast of Ireland. And if he buys in Iceland—" He broke off, frowning. Gorland scratched his head as if he was trying to puzzle it out. "Well, maybe I can let you have this one truckload. How many men's he got out there? One truckload gonna be enough? Maybe he wants us to send out another?" "Hell, we could probably use 3 more. Cost more to get it out here that quick. He give you guys enough budget for that?" "Enough budget?" Brown snorted and crossed his arms over his chest. If only you knew what he's spent on the air pumps already. Money's what they call it, no object. You get it? Now, back that truck up here. I don't know, this whole thing, how do I know it's on the up and up? If the guy who ordered it ain't here to sign, who's in charge at Seaworthy if it isn't Ryan? Ryan's the owner, you damned... He took a deep breath, removed his glasses, polished them with a handkerchief. That seemed to calm him. Ryan's the owner. Man named Rizzo over at the administration office, he's in charge. Brown turned to sign the manifest held up for him by a thick-set man in overalls. Gorlin leaned over, trying to make out what was on it. All he could gather was Air Purification System Building 3233, and the cost of that system added up to well over $1 million. Brown saw Gorland trying to set the manifest and stepped to block his view. Mister, you sure are nosy sort. Gorland shrugged, just as curious as anybody else. Well, I can't let you sign for this stuff. Where's this Rizzo office at? Maybe I better talk to him. Brown hesitated, looking at him suspiciously. Then he shrugged and told him, and Gorland wrote it down on the clipboard. He turned to peer inside the warehouse. Hey, that one of those bathysphere things? Brown stared at him. What delivery company you say you were with? Me? Acme, name's Foster. Yeah. Let me have another look at the clipboard of yours. Now who's the nosy one? See you when I get you the signature, pal. Gorland turned and hurried down the stairs. He felt the men on the loading dock staring at him. He glanced back and saw one big fist-faced palooka take a sap out of his pocket and slap it in his palm. He hurried to the truck, forcing himself not to run, and got out of there as fast as he could, smiling to himself as he drove away. Maybe this wasn't going to be a blackmail operation. Maybe it was something much bigger. Yeah, if he figured out where to stand, it'd be raining money, and all he needed was a bucket. It's not generally known that I sometimes back Broadway musicals, said Andrew Ryan as the limousine pulled in front of the theater. I prefer to do it quietly. I have a rather old-fashioned taste in music. They tell me George M. Cohen or Jolson, they're more my style. Or Rudy Vallee. I don't care much for this jitterbug business. Don't understand it. He waved a hand at the marquee. You know the work of Sander Cohen? Some say he's getting a bit long in the tooth, but I think he's every bit the musical genius he ever was. A Renaissance man of the arts, really. Bill read the marquee. Sander Cohen in Young Dandies. Caw! He burst out. Me ma took a liking to Sander Cohen oh my God. Me ma took a liking to Sander Cohen a few years back. Fair wore out this kissin' in the tulip over her old Victrola. Ah, yes, I was a fan of his No One Understands Me. You shall meet him tonight, my boy. We're just in time to catch his final number. I've seen the show many times, of course, and we'll have a word backstage. Karlowski, this is fine here. The chauffeur, Ivan Karlowski, was a pale-haired man, scarred and impassive, with a distinctively Russian bone structure. He gave a small salute with his gloved hand and nodded. Bill had heard that Karlowski was not only one of the finest auto mechanics around, but also pretty much invincible. No one messed with Karlowski. Bill got out of the limo, instinctively holding the door for Ryan and closing it behind him. A group of swells spilled out of the theater, laughing, though the music of the show could be heard through the open theater door. The show was still going on. A bored-looking man in spats and tuxedo was escorting a platinum-haired girl in white mink. Two other young men followed with elaborately coiffed girls on their arms, all of them coiffed? All of them tipsy with intermission cocktails. Bill hesitated as Ryan paused, glowering at the swells, seeming to disapprove of them leaving the theater early. Say, laughed one in the top hat, that Sander Cohen is a funny old character. I heard some young men go into his dressing room never come out again, said a creepy-eyed swell in a bowler hat, more seriously low voice. "Well, you won't get me to one of his shows again," said the top hat, as they strolled wobblingly off. "Menacing about like that, constantly in the spotlight, all that makeup, looked like a clown." Ryan growled audibly to himself as he glared after them. Drunks! He shook his head, stalking towards the alley between the theaters that led to the stage door. Bill followed, feeling a bit squiffy himself, though he hadn't had a drop today. He felt socially out of his depth with Ryan, but the whole experience exhilarated him too. "This way, Bill," Ryan muttered, "those decadent young poltroons. But it's ever that way. Inconsequential people know only mockery. Only the great understand the great." He rapped on the stage door, which was opened by a cigar-chewing bulldog of a man. "Well, who is it now?" And then his cigar dropped from his slack mouth. "Oh, sorry, Mr. Ryan. I didn't realize it was you. Please come in, sir. Right this way, sir. Nice night, ain't it?" What an arse-kisser, Bill thought, as the man, practically curtsying, let them in. An echoing passage, and then they were backstage, standing in the wings, watching Sander Cohen. He was just finishing off his climactic number, "Hop Away to Heaven." Strange to see a stage show from this angle, everything looking oddly overlit, the clack of heels on the wooden stage audible, the extreme angle not showing the dancers to best effect. They seemed almost to lumber around. And Sander Cohen was stranger still. The fading Broadway star was wearing a silvery jacket that might have seemed more natural on a Busbeak Berkeley dancing girl. He had matching silver trousers with a red stripe down the side. His boots, with heels like a flamenco dancer's, glittered too. He had a rather bulbous head, with thinning hair emphasized by a great pale swath of forehead, not much helped by a spit curl, and a puckish little mustache, upturned at the ends. He did wear a surprising amount of pancake, and what seemed to be eyeliner. Cohen was sashaying rhythmically about, singing in a jaunty tenor, spinning a silvery walking stick in his fingers. 2 rows of very handsome young men and pretty girls danced in chorus patterns behind him. Cohen sang, "If you want to hop, hop, hop with me, we'll multiply like crazy, like a couple of bunnies. Oh, hop to heaven, just hop to heaven with me." "Admittedly a trivial number," said Ryan, leaning over to whisper behind his hand to Bill, "but the public needs that sort of thing, you know, something light from time to time. Sander would like to be more serious. Artists should have their chance to work without interference, so long as it's profitable, of course." Bill nodded, hoping that this blighter did have something better than this rubbish. He wouldn't have pictured Ryan listening to this prancing chap, would have thought him more the Wagner type. Wagner. Or maybe Tchaikovsky. But then, you never know what kind of music a man might relax with. He'd once known a bare-fisted bruiser of a longshoreman who thought nothing of taking on 3 men in a bar fight, but burst into sentimental tears when he saw Shirley Temple singing "The Good Ship Lollipop," wiping his eyes, sniffing, "Ain't she a pip?" The curtain rang down to a rather puny spatter of applause, and went back up almost immediately, so that Cohen could take several bows that no one was asking for. The dancers hurried off stage. A gesture from Ryan, and one of the dancers lingered, a corn-fed chorus girl in bathing suit trimmed in white fur. A great flowing spill of blonde hair fell over her pink shoulders. Golden bangs stuck to her forehead in a light sheen of perspiration. She was a big girl, in an Amazonian voluptuous way, and seemed several inches taller than Ryan, but almost shrank in his appearance, while her china blue eyes grew large. "Mr. Ryan!" Her voice was not melodious. It was rather squeakily grating to Bill. He hoped she was a good dancer. He gazed at her benevolently, but with a hungry light in his hard eyes. Then the hunger was somehow folded away, and he seemed almost paternal, carefully reserved. "You positively glowed with talent tonight, Jasmine," Ryan said. "Allow me to present my business associate, Mr. Bill McDonough." She barely glanced at Bill. "Did you really think I was good, Mr. Ryan? You could see me out there?" "Of course I could, my dear. I've watched you dance many times. You're always stimulating." I get rid of her accent. I'm going to try and do that. "Enough for a lead?" I can't seem to get anywhere for the. Enough for a lead? I can't seem to get anywhere in this business, Mr. Ryan. I mean, I got here, but I can't get any further than the chorus. I've tried to talk to Sander, but he doesn't seem interested in me. And he's so involved with his, what does he call them, his protégés. A big talent like yours will pop out in good time, Jasmine. Don't you worry, Ryan said as the curtain closed on another uncalled-for bow by Sander Cohen. Do you really think so, Mr. Ryan? I mean, if you wanted to. In fact, Ryan interrupted, with such authority that her voice cut out in mid-squeak, I'm going to help you. I'm going to pay for you to take elocution lessons. Your only weakness as an artist is, shall we call it, vocal presentation. I took such lessons myself once. You'll sound differently, and people will look at you differently. Elocution! Sure, I know what that is. Maybe she does have an accent now. She seemed a bit frustrated, though. Seemed improving her elocution wasn't what she had in mind. I am founding a new community, he said, glancing about them, in another place, some distance away. You might call it a resort, in a sense. It'll take a while to complete, but given the right dedication, you could work there, in show business. It would definitely be a new start. Where will it be exactly? Oh, foreign places, you know. Like Bermuda? Well, more or less. Sander. Ooh, a resort, that'd be swell, she said, walking away, but looking at him as she went, so that she almost collided with Sander Cohen. Do excuse me, my dear, Cohen muttered, with a forced smile. Cohen brightened when he saw Ryan, putting on a completely different aspect, beaming, one eyebrow arched. Andrew, my dear fellow, you caught the show after all. We have been standing here entranced. Allow me to introduce you to Bill McDonough. Bill, eh? Cohen scrutinized him with sleepy eyes. Earthy. Right you are, Bill said. Keep the old feet on the ground, me. And British, how charming. You know, just the other day I was saying to Noel Coward, he went into a lengthy anecdote, much of which was lost in the buzz of the backstage bustle, but it seemed to be something about Coward's rather embarrassing admiration for Cohen. One wishes he wouldn't fawn so. Bill noticed that Cohen's left eyebrow seemed permanently cocked, stuck higher than the other, never going down, as if he'd been paralyzed in a condition of irony. You're a real artist, not just a cocktail wit like Noel Coward, Ryan said. It's only natural the man should be overwhelmed. You are too good, Andrew. It bothered Bill, hearing this man call Mr. Ryan by his first name. Didn't seem right somehow. He took a step back, feeling that Cohen was standing rather too near him. Andrew, can I expect you at my little opening in the village? Ryan frowned. Opening? Did you not receive the invitation? I shall have to positively flay my personal assistant alive. I have a bit of a gallery show at the Villarina Club. My new obsession, an art form almost unknown to America. Looking sleepy-eyed again, he turned to explain to Bill, it's a tableau vivant show. Yes, Ryan said to Bill. Tableau vivant. It's a French artistic tradition. They pose people on a stage in different ways to represent scenes from history or drama. They stand there in costume, almost like sculptures. Precisely, Cohen crowed, clapping his hands together with delight. Living sculptures, in a way. In this case, they are representing scenes from the life of the Roman Emperor Caligula. Sounds fascinating, Ryan said, frowning slightly. Caligula. Well. My protégés, such artistic courage, they stand there, posed in a state of near undress in a cold room, minute after minute, as if frozen in place. He tossed his head like a stallion and whispered, They're in fierce competition to please me. Oh, how hard they work at it! But art calls for an agony of self-sacrifice, for submission, an inverted immolation upon its altar. That's why I admire you, Sander, Ryan said. Your complete devotion to your art. No matter what anyone thinks, you are yourself completely. That's essential to art, it seems to me, expressing one's true self. But it seemed to Bill that whatever Sander Cohen really was, it was all hidden away, even as he presented another side of himself to the world with great verve. It was like there was a scared little animal looking out of his sleepy eyes, and yet he spoke with flourishes, moved with striking dynamism. Queer sort of duck. I may be out of the country for your opening, I'm afraid, Ryan was saying, but I was just telling Jasmine. Oh, Jasmine, Cohen shrugged dismissively. She does have her charms. Believe me, I understand, but Andrew, I'm told that this show may close rather sooner than we expected. Dandy's was to be my re-emergence, my metamorphosis, and the cocoon I find is rather constricting and may squeeze me out too soon. He hugged himself tight, seemed to writhe in his own hug as he said it. I feel positively squeezed. Artists chafe at constraint, Ryan said, nodding sympathetically. Don't worry about the show. Broadway will soon be old hat. We'll create our own venue for genius, Sander. Really? And with what sort of scope? A large audience? You'll see. As for scope, well, there will be plenty of people to appreciate you there. Almost a captive audience in a way. Ooh, nothing I'd like better than a captive audience. But I must away. I see Jimmy signaling desperately to me for the dressing room. Do keep me informed as to this new project, Andrew. You will be among the first to know when it's ready, Sander. It will take some courage on your part. Ryan smiled crookedly. But if you take the leap, you'll find yourself immersed in something beautiful. They watched Sander Cohen strutting off towards the dressing rooms. It seemed to Bill that Cohen was off his trolley, but Ryan was right. Genius was eccentric. As if guessing his thoughts, Ryan said, Yes, Bill, he can be outrageous, exasperating. But all the great ones hurt the eyes and burn the ears a bit. He calls himself the Napoleon of mime, sometimes. And so he is, when he's miming. Come along, Bill. We're off to the airport. If you're quite ready to go, or are you having second thoughts? Bill grinned. Not me, sir. I'm in. A to Z. I'm diving in at the deep end, Mr. Ryan. All right, that was chapter 3. And I'm going to take a short little break. And I will be right back in just a few minutes to read the next chapter. All right, welcome back. On to chapter 4. All right, New York City, still 1946. Look, Mr. Gorland, I don't know much about it. Merton was sitting in the back room of the clanger, across from what used to be his own seat. Now Gorland was behind the desk, with Garcia standing to one side, eyeing Merton and tapping the blackjack in his palm, while on the other side was Reggie, a bruiser from the Bronx, wearing the doorman's uniform that went with his day job. Gorland knew Reggie from old days. He was one of the only people alive who knew Frank's real last name, and he sometimes hired him as extra muscle. Tonight, Gorland had to put the fear of God into Merton. Harve Merton needed to have more fear for Frank Gorland, than for the powerful Andrew Ryan. I mean, if I knew anything else, Merlin went on, wringing his hands, I'd tell ya. Hey, you got any hot advice on the horses, Merton? Garcia asked, grinning. Gorland signaled for Garcia to be quiet. The bookie shrugged, put away his sap, and took out a cigar instead. In the lull, the sound of the bar seeped through the closet's closed door. A girl squealed with laughter. A man hooted. You don't know nothing about Dempsey. Let's all think this through, Merton, Gorland said, pouring Merton a drink from the bourbon bottle. You're telling me you got a job with Seaworthy on the North Atlantic project from this guy Rizzo. You were working as a steward on one of their ships, right? And they take your ass out to the North Atlantic and keep it there for a month and a half, and you didn't see a thing out there? Gorland shoved the shot glass across the desk, and Merton snatched it up. Thanks, that's about the size of it. I mean, some stuff was taken down, under the water, but he laughed nervously. I didn't go down with it. They were all hush-hush about what was going on down there. Much as your life was worth to talk about it, one fella said after he come up. I don't know what they were up to. You see, I know what they're up to, in a general kind of way, Gorland said, pouring himself a drink. Building something big. But I don't know what Ryan's angle is. Where's the money? You seen him bring up any ore? Mining goodies, gold, silver, oil? No, nothing like that. Just a lot of ships. Never saw Mr. Ryan. Heard his name sometimes, that's all. I was busy the whole time. Seasick, too. I was glad to get back here and look for another job. Yeah, you'll live to look for another job, too, Reggie said helpfully. His voice smiled. If you tell Mr. Gorland exactly what he needs to know. I swear I didn't find out anything else. I hardly left the galley of that old big ship. Now, Frank Fontaine, he might know something. He's got boats going out there to supply him with fish, and they get to talk more, to the guys in the construction. Gorland frowned thoughtfully. Frank Fontaine. Fontaine Fisheries. He's used to smuggle stuff from Cuba up here in those fishing boats of his. Now he's delivering fish. You're kidding me. I saw him on the dock. That's what he told me. I used to buy some of the rum he smuggled up here for your place. Merton swallowed. Fontaine says there's more money selling fish to Ryan for that crew out there than there is selling rum to New York. They got a crying need for food out there. Got an army of workers to feed. Gorland grunted thoughtfully to himself. That did dovetail with what he'd heard at the loading dock. The one sure way to get close to that operation was to supply it. A crazy thought came to him, bringing with it some interesting possibilities. But if he did go that far, and far was the word, all right, he'd be way out of his stomping ground. He'd be splashing around in the North Atlantic. There was something about the secret project of Ryan's that fascinated him, that drew him the way rumors of buried pirate gold drew a treasure hunter. Millions of dollars were being sunk into the North Atlantic. He ought to be able to scoop some of it up. Years ago, when Frank Gorland was dodging the law, he hopped a freight train. Right in the boxcar, he read an old newspaper about the newly minted industrialist Andrew Ryan. There was a picture of him standing in front of a fancy building with his name on it. That picture had stirred something in him. The picture of Andrew Ryan standing there in front of the skyline in Manhattan like he owned it had made Frank think, whatever he's got, I want it. I'm going to take it from him. could be now was his chance. But first he had to figure out what Ryan's angle was, what he was up to or down to. Out there was a city down in the cold cuts of that dark ocean. So now we're somewhere over the Atlantic. Same year, 1946. It's a converted Liberator, really. Andrew Ryan led Bill McDonough through a big, humming aircraft cabin towards the tail. A Stratocruiser now. United Airlines has ordered 11 of them for luxury flights. But this is the prototype. Of course, this is a prop plane, but the next generation will be jets. Saw a fighter jet in the war, my last trip out, Bill said. ME-262 it was. German prototype. Oh, that was... Didn't even engage us. I reckon they'll be test flying. Yes, Ryan said distractedly. Fast and efficient, the jet engine. Haven't bothered developing them, not as aircraft, because after the North Atlantic project, we hope to need no aircraft. We'll have a great many submersibles, and in time we'll hardly need those. We hope to be entirely self-sufficient. Submersibles? Bill must have misheard him. Bill had mixed feelings about being on this plane. The drone of its engines was just close enough to the sound of the bombers he'd flown on in the war. He'd taken a ship to get to the USA after. He had had enough of planes. Seen his best friend turn to red marmalade the last time out. Inside, though, this plane wasn't much like a bomber. Except for the sound, the vibrations through the floor, the curved inner skin, it could easily be a luxury suite at a hotel. The Victorian-style chairs and sofas were bolted down, but they were luxurious. Their silken red cushions trimmed in gold. Lace curtains were elegantly swept back from the windows with silk cords. The cabin was quietly served by 3 liveried servants and a chef. Behind a stainless steel bar, an Asian servant in a red and black jacket with gold braid looked up attentively as they passed. But Ryan wasn't after drinks yet. They passed through a red velvet curtain into an after cabin, smaller, with a metal table bolted to the center of the floor. On the table was a fairly large object, rising to a ghost under a white muslin covering. The room contained almost nothing else, except taped to one interior wall, to the left, was a full-color drawing of a crowded, highly stylized city. It reminded Bill, at first glance, of the Emerald City of Oz. Only the city in the colorful drawing appeared to be underwater. A school of colorfully sketched fish swam past its windows. Was it Atlantis, the day after it went down? Ryan strode dramatically up to the table and whipped off the cover. Et voila! He said, smiling. He had revealed a scale model of the city. It was all one structure, formed of many lesser structures, all in the industrial arts style, as if the designer of the Chrysler Building had made an entire small city to go with it. The model was about 3 feet high, a construction of linked towers, sheaths of green glass and chrome, transparent tubular passageways, statues, very little open space between buildings. The structure seemed quite sealed off, and indeed Bill made out what appeared to be airlocks near the bases of several towers, resembling artfully turned lighthouses. Outside the airlock sat the mock-up of a small submarine. Through one of the miniature city transparent panels, he saw what looked like a tiny bathysphere, partway risen up through a vertical shaft. This, said Andrew Ryan, breathing hard as he said it, the muslin sheet dangling at his side, is Rapture. A surge of turbulence hit the plane at exactly that moment, making the model city quiver dangerously on its table. Bill stared at it carefully in the turbulence. Right, lovely, isn't it? Rapturous-like. Okay. No, Bill, Rapture is the name of the city. What you see here is just the core, the downtown, you might say. Its foundations are already under construction, a habitat for thousands of people beneath the waters of the North Atlantic. Bill gaped at him. You're taking a piss. Ryan flashed one of his pensive smiles. But it's true. It's being constructed in secret, in a part of the sea rarely plied by anyone. The architecture is glorious, isn't it? The Wales brothers designed it. Greavy's been implementing their vision. And now so will you, Bill. Bill shook his head in wonder. It's being built right now? The turbulence died down, to Bill's relief, and it brought ghostly memories of being in a plane hit by flak. How big's Rapture to be, then? It will be a small city, hidden away under the ocean, miles to a side. Lots of open space inside it. We don't want claustrophobia. The model's shape reminded Bill of the densest part of Manhattan in some ways. All those buildings packed together. But in this case, the buildings were crowded even closer and even more interconnected. Do you see that what's in there through that little window? Ryan pointed. That is going to be Parkland, a park under the sea. I call it Arcadia. We have a system for bringing reflected sunlight down, as well as electrical light. Arcadia will help provide oxygen, as well as being a place for relaxation. Now here you see. He broke off at a sudden rough turbulence and the boom of thunder, somewhere close at hand. Men looked nervously at the window opposite the drawing. Bill put one hand to the edge of the table and ducked to see through the port. Black and gray storm clouds billowed angrily outside, flickering with lightning. Dodgy ride coming. Another boom, another quiver, and Bill closed his eyes, trying to will away the pictures rising in his mind. The boom of a flak shell, the clatter and whine of many small, vicious impacts. Another shell exploding just outside. A section of the bomber hull suddenly gone, blown out by the Jerries. Wind roaring in through the ragged gape like a madhouse invader, as Bill McDonough, radio man, sees the curly-headed Welsh lad, a green little blighter, just a week out of training, being sucked backwards against a 5-foot breach in the curved metal wall, pulled hard by the sudden drop in air pressure, the boy's face contorting in terror. Bill shouts to the pilots, "Reduce altitude!" as he rushes to the young flyer, gripping a stanchion with his right hand so he can try pulling the Welsh lad back with his left, knowing full well it was no good. The boy screams as the suction around the breech jerks him harder into the jagged edge, the sharp metal ripping through his left shoulder. His blood precedes him, streaming out through the gap, and then he follows it. Just gone, like a magic act, vanished into the roaring sky. All that remains are scraps of torn clothes and skin flapping on the ragged edges of the bulkhead. The boy is falling somewhere, out in the gray mist. Bill clings to the stanchion as the bomber angles sharply down to equalize air pressure. "Bill, you all right?" Bill managed a sickly grin. "There's a reason I took a ship to America instead of a plane, Gov. Sorry, I'm all right." "I think we both need a drink." "Right you are, Mr. Ryan. That's the very medicine." "Let's have a seat in the main cabin and ride out this storm. We should be at the airport in another hour or so. Winds are behind us. Then it's to the ship. Come on. I'll have Key pour you the best single malt you've ever tasted, and I'll tell you about the Great Chain." The bar in Staten Island was almost deserted tonight, but Captain Fontaine was there, as arranged, sitting in a booth in the dim corner, frowning at his beer, just waiting for Frank Gorland. Captain Fontaine did look a lot like the man who called himself Frank Gorland, but he was more weather-beaten, a little older. He wore a red watch cap and a long green corduroy double-breasted coat. His calloused red hands showed the life he'd led at sea, first as a smuggler, now as the head of a small fishing fleet. Gorland ordered a bottled beer from the stout barmaid, who seemed to be flirting with the drunken marine, and carried it over to Captain Fontaine's table. Fontaine didn't look up from brooding on his beer as Gorland sat across from him. "Gorland, seems to me that every time I run into you, something goes wrong." "How's that? What's about all that cash you made from what I did for you on your last cargo?" "Your cut was near as big as mine, and all you did for it was run your mouth." "Well, running my mouth is how I live, friend. Now look, Fontaine, you want the information I have or not? I'm offering it for free. I'm hoping we can work together again. We can't do it if you're in jail. So you'd better cock me one of them shell-like ears. I've got words. They're gonna wait till you head out and raid you on the way back." Fontaine slurped at his brew. "They who?" "Why, Gorland leaned over the table and lowered his voice. "Just the Federal Bureau of Investigation, that's who. Agent Voss is chewing at your rump." Fontaine sat up straight. Gorlin looked at him calmly, believing it himself almost as he said it. I got it from my sister's best friend. She's a secretary for them. Keeps an eye on things for me. That was the secret to being a good liar, believing it when you said it. So she's typing up some kind of warrant, and there you are, Captain Frank Fontaine. Smuggling, it says. Drugs, it says. Keep your voice down. Anyhow, I don't signify. I gave up smuggling that stuff. Company I work for now is bringing me crazy money to bring my catch over by Iceland. Long ways, but it's big money. Safe and legal. You mean your deal with Andrew Ryan's operation out there? Fontaine shrugged. Nothing you need to know about. So he took the fish out there himself. Interesting. The exact whereabouts of North Atlantic Project would be on the charts in one of those boats. Gorlin sighed and shook his head. You don't get it. Boss is out to get you. He's going to look down your hold first time you get out to sea and plant the dope down there. You gave him the slip one too many times. I don't believe it. They're raiding you all right, and suppose they don't set you up. They know that Ryan's trying to hide something out there, so they'll take you in for questioning. How'll Ryan feel about that? You want to go to jail for standing in the way of an investigation? What proof is there a raid coming, Gorland? Proof? Just a carbon from the raiding order. Gorland passed it over. Every good con man knows a good forger. You can sell your boats to me and slip off to Cuba. Fontaine looked at the order, and his shoulders slumped. Maybe. It's true I'm sick of being on those boats. Like to retire to Cuba. But I want a good price. Sure, I'll give you top money. Fontaine looked at him narrowly. Why would you be so goddamn helpful, Gorland? It don't add up. It's you they're looking for, not me. I'll play fisherman till things cool off, make some money from Ryan, and have the trawlers for when it's safe to smuggle again. Fontaine expelled a long, slow breath. Gorland knew that meant he was giving in. He felt the physical thrill, an almost sexually delicious inward shiver that always came when a mark surrendered. 2 nights later, Frank Gorland was waiting in the pilot house of the fishing trawler, trying to get used to the smell of old codfish and drinking coffee. The trawler was called Happy Drift. Christ, but it was chilly on this old tub. He heard a hail from the dock and smiled. Captain Fontaine was here for his money. Gorland nodded to his grizzled, gray-haired helmsman and said, When I give you the signal, head due east. Got it, boss. Call me Captain. I'm about to be one. Aye, aye, Captain. Gorland went down the ladder to the main deck, where he found Fontaine stalking back and forth, scowling. Gorland, I hear you fired my crew. You're up to something. This whole thing is starting to stink. Surprised you can smell a stink at this point, but come on down to the galley and I'll explain. I've got a parcel of money for you. Gorland turned and went below decks, humming to himself. Fontaine hesitated and followed. There was no crew staying warm in Happy Drift's little galley. Gorland planned to pick up the rest of the crew later. On a small fold-out table near the stove was a small brown suitcase. There you are, Fontaine. Open it up and count it. Fontaine looked at him, and he looked at the suitcase. Then he licked his lips, went to the suitcase, opened it, and stared. It was filled with dead fish. Red snapper. I'm thinking, Gorland said, taking a blackjack from his coat pocket, of changing the name of this boat to Happy Grift. What do you think? Captain Fontaine turned angrily to Gorland, who hit him hard with the blackjack. Crack! Right on the forehead. Fontaine went down like a sack of bricks. Gorland put the blackjack away and went to the ladder, climbed to the deck, turned and waved up at the pilot house where the helmsman Bergman was watching for his signal. The helmsman pointed at the dock, and Gorland remembered he had to cast off. That much he knew how to do. He cast the ropes off and the boat roared to life, swinging out from the dock towards the open sea. Humming My Wild Irish Rose, Gorland descended to the galley. Captain Fontaine, face down, was still out cold. Gorland went through the man's pockets, removing his identification, money, personal effects. Might need them. He considered Captain Fontaine, now stirring slightly on the deck, and then he muttered to himself, Do it. Go all the way, Frank. He took a deep breath, then pulled off his shirt and pants, He dragged Fontaine's outer clothing off him, then switched clothes with him, wincing at the smell of Fontaine's unwashed trousers, just a little too large, had to tighten the belt. Then he used his old clothing to tie Fontaine's hands behind him. "What are you doing?" Fontaine asked, starting to come to. "Let me go." "I'll let you go right now, Captain," Gorlin said, "but you gotta climb that ladder. I'll help you." "I need clothes. It's freezing out there." "You'll be all taken care of. Up the ladder." He got the bleary Fontaine up at last and out on the tilting deck. Fog streamed by and wreathed the sea. He glanced at the pilot house. Bergman was facing out to sea. Not that he would probably have cared. The man had done 5 years in prison not so long ago. He was being paid well. He'd go along with whatever his new boss wanted. Fontaine was swaying on the deck, goggling blearily about him. We're out to sea. Why are we?" "I'll show you why," Gorlin said, escorting him to the side. "You ever notice how much you and I look alike, Frank? We even have the same first name. Possibilities, Frank, possibilities. I got a whole new concept here. I call it identity theft. What do you think?" Then he bent, grabbed the vessel's former captain by the ankles, and tilted him over the side, head first, down into the cold sea. A yell, a splash or two, and Captain Fontaine went down. He didn't come up. Captain Fontaine was dead. Long live Captain Frank Fontaine. All right, that was chapter 4. I'm taking a little short break, rest my voice a little bit, and then I'm gonna come on back. All right, give me like 3 to 5 minutes. All right. Thanks for waiting. Now it's time for chapter 5. And this is the last chapter of first book. I was going to stop at chapter 4, but then it was like one more chapter and then we're done with the book, or the part or whatever. And I was like, okay, we're going to do all 3. So, chapter 5. We're in the North Atlantic, 1946. The Andrew Ryan was pitching at sea anchor that gray morning, and Bill was queasy. The cigarette helped a little. He tried to ignore the steward throwing up over the starboard rail. Gazing into the sea, he watched the frothing bathysphere bob to the surface. "These are no ordinary bathyspheres," Ryan said proudly, joining him at the taffrail, his hair so slickered down by considerable wind So slicked down the considerable wind didn't budge it. Some of the men call them slinkers because they get around with such agility. "Never seen the like. Almost elegant it is." Ryan looked at him closely. "Feeling seasick? I have a pill." "No," said Bill, stepping back from a burst of spray. The spray put his cigarette out, and he flicked the butt overboard. "I'll take this rust bucket over your bucketing palace in the sky any day, guv'nor." He grabbed the rail as the deck pitched under him. "Now then, Bill." Ryan took a good grip on the rail himself and looked at Bill closely. "Are you ready to go down? I'm informed that the wind's dropping. In an hour the sea will be just calm enough for the launching." Bill swallowed. He looked out to sea at the other 2 platform ships and the retreating shape of the Olympian as it headed back to New York for supplies. The platform ships were modified barges, linked by chains and buoys, marking out a square half-mile of sea. It was an enormous enterprise. He had to do his part and accept going down in the bathysphere. He had been expecting this, but he wasn't eager. "Ready, Mr. Ryan. Always ready, me." He expected to change into a diving suit or something aquatic, but an hour later they went as they were, both of them in overcoats. Ryan's cut of the best material, precisely tailored. The bathysphere was hoisted onto the deck, steadied by the stoic crewmen in their rubber slickers and sou'westers and southwesters as Ryan and Bill got in. It was roomy enough for 2 inside, with a window in the hatch and small ports on the sides. The smell was a bit like a locker room, but it was comfortably padded and equipped with handholds. Between them was a bank of controls and gauges. Ryan didn't seem concerned with them as the bathysphere was hoisted up, lower over the side, and released. A light switched on inside as the sea closed over them. Bill, licking his lips, waited for Ryan to somehow pilot the vessel, but he didn't. He simply sat back, smiling mischievously, seeming amused by Bill's transparent attempt at appearing unworried. They sank deeper and deeper. Then the bathysphere stopped with a slight jolt and began to move horizontally of its own accord. "It's radio-controlled," Ryan explained at last. "We don't have to do a thing. It follows an underwater radio signal to the entrance shaft, uses turbine props. You will experience no discomfort from increased air pressure. There isn't any increased air pressure needed. The same will hold true in Rapture itself. There is no danger of the bends. We have a new method of constantly equalizing air pressure at any depth with no special gases. It will be almost always exactly the same as on the surface, with only minor variations." Bill looked at him skeptically. "Air pressure always the same? At any depth?" "At any depth?" Ryan gave him a mysterious smile, leveraging the opportunity to brag a bit. "We have gone to great lengths to keep our discoveries to ourselves. I have found some of the most unusual, extraordinarily talented scientists in the world, Bill, and in some very difficult spots." He peered through a porthole, smiling absently. "The hardest one to get at was quite peculiar, but brilliant fellow, name of Souchong. He was stuck in Korea during the Japanese occupation. The Japs had accused him of selling their men opium to pay for his experiments. Imperialists have such a narrow view of things. Speaking of marbles, you can see the foundations of Rapture there. Before we go into the dome shaft, and let us have some appropriate music." Bill bent and peered through the port. Below them, electric lights glowed through the blue gloom along the rocky bottom of the sea. Lines of lights like landing markers for a plane on a foggy night. He saw the rugged outlines of what might be a decayed volcanic crater, like a miniature mountain range, around a mysterious electric glow. The music kicked in. Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, the Groff arrangement for piano, and symphony flowing from hidden speakers in the bathysphere. As the rhapsodic music swelled, Bill made out structures looming through the dark blue water beyond the stony natural ramparts, the frameworks of elegant buildings, the panels of unfinished walls, the silhouette of what might be a statue, tilting as it waited to be craned into place. "The genius of the Wells brothers," Ryan said, as more mighty soaring structures came into view. "Simon and Daniel. Ironic. Really they're starting with cathedrals and coming to build Rapture. But Simon says that Rapture will be a great cathedral, but not to God, to man's will." "How do you get the foundations done?" Bill asked, peering through the viewport. "That had to be a great challenge." "We retrofitted my steamer, the Olympian, fixed it up to take cargo, and we brought the sinker out here and put it together. It's a big submersible platform. We'd lower it to the bottom with the deep sea team and everything they needed. It's there permanently, absorbs vibration, offers insulation for the biggest central section of Rapture. Brought in the platform ships for the next stages." A small submarine, equipped with mechanical arms, glided by the construction site. "You can see the remains of the very ancient volcanic cone," Ryan went on, pointing. "That's a clue about Rapture's energy source. You see that dark spot there, to one side? That's the opening of a deep crevasse, a real abyss, but the city's foundations rest on solid rock. It's quite secure." And then the panorama vanished, swallowed up in shadow. The music continued as they dipped into the dark, vertical entrance shaft leading down into the dome. It was as if they were going down a chimney. They descended as the descent was sickeningly fast and smooth, until they bumped against the concrete and steel sides of the water-filled shaft with an alarming clang. A metallic squeal came as the hatch in the shaft shut before them, a shivering clunk, and they came to the complete halt. They were in an airlock, Bill reckoned, as the water drained away. A mechanical grating sound and another metallic screech, and the hatch of the bathysphere opened. "Come along, Bill." Ryan switched off the music and climbed out through the hatch. Bill followed and found himself in a short, metal-ribbed passage of rough concrete. Electric lights burned overhead. The smell of the sea mingled with the smell of new cement. 2 strides along the short passage, then a metal door swung open for them, and there was Dr. Creevy, in long work coat and metal construction helmet. Greavy's mouth trembled as he gazed at Ryan. He backed away to let Ryan into the sizable hemispherical room like a courtier backing away from the sovereign. "This is an honor, sir," Greavy muttered, "but really it's a bit too risky." "Risky?" Ryan said, looking around. "Nonsense. Bill, he's trying to keep me out of here." But Ryan was chuckling as he looked around at the equipment in the dome. "Only until we have more safety structures in place. McDonough understands." "I'm here now, Greavy," Ryan said, "and I mean to have a look around. I am sinking my life into this project, and I need to see it flourishing. Is Simon here?" "Not here, sir. He's in sub 3. "Let him do his work. You can show us around." The dome was about 200 feet in diameter, about 35 feet to the ceiling in the center, which was supported by a grid of metal girders. To Bill, the girders looked like steel, but he knew they were only steel. They'd all be buried under a mountain of salt water. He supposed they must be made of some special alloy. Bill recognized some of the big, wheeled machines crowded into the room. Routers as big as small cars, mining drills, scoops, and cranes, many of them still dripping water. Some, adapted for deep sea use, looked strange to him. One machine was about 20 feet long, with enormous pincers at the ends of jointed arms, like the ones on the submarine. "What's that thing do?" Bill asked, pointing to it. "The mechanical gripper?" Greavy asked. "That's one of our basic workhorses, remote-controlled. It's a concept that came out of weapons development in the war." "Right. Like the teletanks the Russians used." "Didn't work out so well, them things." "Our remote control is reliable, like the bathysphere you came in. Remote-controlled machines speed up construction. Very difficult to set up the foundations of Rapture in this deep, cold water otherwise. We have a good deal of Hephaestus level set up already, and indeed geological energy is already flowing into the finished units. Greavy glanced at Ryan for approval before continuing. Ryan nodded, and Greavy went on. It's heat-driven electrical energy drawn from volcanic sources under the seafloor, hot springs and fumaroles, sulfur chimneys and the like. Geothermal, some call it. A virtually endless source of power. Wonderful, isn't it? No coal needed, no oil, Greavy said, rubbing his hands together gleefully. Once the supply line is set up, the energy flow goes on as long as the earth retains its heat. We have 12 domes like this one arrayed around the site, Ryan added proudly. We sank them, pumped them out, piping clean air. The domes are all connected by tunnels we've built right on top of the seabed. Not sure I believe it, Gov, Bill said, staring at the big gripper. And here I am looking at it. Ryan chuckled. Then you shall see it up close. Greavy, ask Wallace to take us in for a closer look. Roland Wallace was a bearded, dour man of about 40, with deep-set eyes and a furrowed brow. Ryan introduced him. This is a man you can count on to get things done in tough conditions. Wallace led them to the large steel door, one of the 3 placed symmetrically around the dome. He checked a couple of dials on a panel beside the door, nodded to himself, and spun the wheel. He grunted as it swung open into a tunnel made of some amalgam pocked by vents and ribbed by metal. Now, if you gentlemen will wait to the side here. They pressed against the wall to the right. Ryan, with an expression of proprietary pride, After a minute, the battery-powered gripper drove slowly through the doorway, whirring to itself. Affixed to its rear was a small cockpit, where Wallace drove. The gripper's jointed black metal arms retracted. Behind him came a little radio-slaved tram, reminding Bill of a small funicular without the table. It seemed to be driving itself, and it stopped in front of Ryan and Bill when the gripper stopped. Step in, Ryan said, and they climbed into the leather mesh seats of the little shuttle, side by side. The gripper moved off, and the little shuttle followed. They passed under the electric lights of the tunnel for what seemed a quarter mile, when suddenly a killer whale flashed overhead, its toothy mouth agape. Bill recoiled. Oi! Ryan laughed dryly. Look closer. Bill leaned out of the tram and saw that the walls here were transparent. They were a heavy polished glass of some kind banded with metal. Light shone upward from electric lamps on the seabed outside the transparent section. He could see the tunnel, mostly cement, occasionally glass, wending down across the seabed toward the framework of Rapture. The foundations of Rapture stood out in shades of dark green and indigo. It's hard to reckon where the water stops and the glass starts. It's like we're in the water with 'em, Bill muttered. A diffuse shimmer from the surface far above answered the glow from the seabed lamps. Schools of fish emerged from billowing forest of kelp green and purple sea fans. Tuna, cod, and fish he couldn't identify, gleaming with iridescence, threading in and out of light and shadow. A squid pulsed by, and then another great black and white orca swept by. Bill was awestruck. Look at that bloody thing! Fast as a swallow, and big enough to swallow a man! It's flying right over us! Wonderful, isn't it? Ryan mused, gazing through the curving, transparent pane as they rolled along. Fairly obvious, looking out at the glorious prospect like this one, why I'm calling the city Rapture. Of course, I've always had a fascination with the deep sea. It's another world, a free world. For years I read of giant squid netted from the depths, the adventures of explorers in diving bells and bathyspheres, strange things sighted by submariners. The thrilling potential of it all. I detest the warmongering of the great powers, but world wars did generate workable submarines. Nothing but glass, holding out all the water, Bill marveled. We're down fair deep, all that bloody great pressure. I'm not ready to share all my secrets with you yet, Bill, but that is in fact a perfect merging of glass and metal. Something new called submolecular bonding, astonishingly pressure-resistant, expensive but worth every cent. The two vehicles paused over the curving transparent pane of the tunnel, and Bill gazed into the shaded blue distances of the sea. He glimpsed great shadowy shapes swimming along out there, murk-veiled outlines not quite definable, appearing and vanishing. An object on the seabed about 500 yards away gave off a faint red glow. "What's that, glowing over there?" "That's our geothermal energy valve," said Ryan. "We lost 3 men setting it up," he added casually, "but now it seems quite secure." 3 men lost? Bill looked at him, suddenly feeling a deep, cold place this was. "How many have died working out here?" "Oh, not that many. Why, when they built the Panama Canal, Bill, how many do you think died there?" Bill thought back to his reading as he watched the silhouette of the bathysphere drifting by overhead. "If I recall, the French lost about 15,000 men. When the Americans finished the job, another 5,000 died." Ryan nodded briskly. "Risk, Bill. Nothing is built without risk. Build an ordinary house and lay the foundations a few inches wrong, the whole thing might collapse on you. Men died for the canal. Men died in the building of great bridges, died attempting to scale the highest mountains. Pioneers died crossing deserts. But we don't take pointless risks. We are observing safety precautions. We don't wish to lose skilled workers. Ah," Ryan pointed, "look there." Bill saw something like a giant lobster flying over, 50 feet long. Then it passed from a patch of dimness into the glow around the edges of Rapture, and he saw it was one of the smaller, specialized submarines he'd glimpsed earlier. Beams of light projected from headlights like shining eyes. Its jointed, pincered mechanical arms were extended to grasp a big, ornate segment of metal wall lowering on a cable. Bill watched a gripper move on opposite to it. Mechanical arms poised to help ease the big metal section into place on a wall. The wall sections appeared to be sculpted, prefabricated metal pieces. Bill thought of the way the Statue of Liberty had been constructed, with the separate pieces made in Europe, then shipped to America, and fitted precisely together to form the gargantuan figure. He noticed there was no one in the small cockpit at the rear of the gripper. He could just make out the connective control cable trailing behind it. "How does anyone see enough to control it?" he asked. "The controller watches through a window?" Ryan smiled. "He's watching on a screen. We use a television camera on that one." "Television? Me second cousin in the Bronx had one. Got a headache, me, when I tried to watch one of those boxes not a week ago. Fellas capering about in dresses, dancing packs of cigarettes." "The technology can be used for more than entertainment," Ryan said. He pointed across the site. "One of our supply submarines." Bill saw it gliding along the far side of Rapture's foundations, a larger submarine, without mechanical arms, that could almost have belonged to the British Navy, except that it was pulling a massive oblong shape behind it on a doubled chain. "It's towing freight in some kind of container," he remarked. "There's a little air in the cargo bag for buoyancy," Wallace said. "Mostly it contains some dry goods, medical supplies, all netted together." "Costly process," Ryan said. "Off we go, Wallace." Wallace returned to the gripper, and they drove on. Through tunnel after tunnel, passing through domes crowded with tool racks, machinery, tables. Here and there a lighted window looked out into the deep. Just outside a dome window, a crowd of translucent pink jellyfish billowed, trailing long, delicate-looking stingers. A strong smell of sweat and old laundry was a physical presence in the domes. Some were partly screened off, and Bill glimpsed men sleeping in cots back there. "The construction goes on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week," Ryan said. "The men work in shifts, 10 hours on, 14 off. We have a recreation dome where beer is sold, music is played, movies are shown. They showed the latest Cagney film here last week." "Fan of Apollon Cassidy meself," Bill murmured, as they passed into another covered tunnel. A transparent panel gave a glimpse of workers in deep-sea diving suits wrestling a culvert-sized copper pipe into place. "We'll be sure to get you some Hopalong Cassidy films to watch when you're down here," Ryan said. "Will I be working down here a great deal, then?" "You'll be with me in New York much of the time, and in Reykjavik. I need the perspective of someone I can trust, but we'll be down here too. I intend to supervise the next stage closely. Rapture will be my legacy. I fully expect to spend the rest of my life down here, and once the city is built." Bill tried to conceal his shock. "The rest of your life, Governor, all of it, down here?" "Oh yes, the ant society up above us is not for us. And radiation from the atomic wars, when they come, will last for many years above the surface of the sea. We'll be safe down here." That's when Bill noticed the hissing sound of wheels through water. He looked over the lower window frame of the little transport and saw 2 inches of water accumulated on the floor of the tunnel. "What's that?" "Wallace, pull us over. Look at the floor." The 2 vehicles jarred to a stop and Bill climbed out. He knew that Ryan wasn't pleased to have him suddenly giving orders, but he also instinctively knew this could be a matter of life and death. "Look here." Bill pointed to the thin coating of water over the amalgam floor. Wallace was getting out, flashing an electric hand torch. "What the devil? We haven't had any leaks in this section." His eyes had grown big, his hands trembled, making the light jiggle on the wet floor. "Didn't you say the water pressure wasn't a problem?" Bill asked, examining the curved walls of the tunnel more closely. "Well, these tunnels aren't entirely made of the new alloy. It's tremendously expensive to make. We keep most of that back for Rapture itself, only the support ribs. But they should be enough. When you consider the steel mesh and the concrete, the doubling of—" "What's this about?" Ryan asked nervously. "Wallace, is there something I should know?" Need to get you back to Dome 1, sir." But Wallace, eyes flicking about, looked more scared for himself than Ryan. "Let's identify the problem first," Ryan snapped. "There," Bill said, pointing. "You see, the support ribs, they're about 1.5 feet farther apart in that spot. Someone's been sloppy. The weakened support yielding to pressure. Stressing the concrete, you see. It's trickling through at the bottom." "I swear to you, this flooding wasn't here 2 hours ago," Wallace said, looking around desperately. I passed through this very section. There was no leak." "That's bad," Bill said. "Means it's happening fast, and it's going to accelerate. We've got to get Mr. Ryan back right bloody now before it—" A resounding, high-pitched crack, and water began to sheet powerfully down from the edge of the metal ribs supporting the tunnel, about 40 feet down. A crack spread visibly through the ceiling, like a slithering, living thing. There was a squeal, an extended, creaking sound of metal buckling, a sizzling sound, then, followed by sparks spitting down, and several of the lights went out near the spraying, hissing leak. Wallace backed away from it, bumping into the little funicular where Ryan was staring down the tunnel. Bill grabbed Wallace's arm, squeezed it hard to snap him out of his panic. "Wallace, listen! This thing I came here in, can it go back without the gripper?" Yeah, there's a switch. I can reverse it, but there's not room for 3 men, and I doubt it could carry so much weight. It's not meant for—" "Quiet and listen. Get in it. Take Mr. Ryan back to the next dome. Soon as you get there, communicate with the other domes. There must be some kind of public address system." "Yeah, there is," Wallace said, staring aghast at the sheets of water shooshing down, spraying hard on the tunnel floor, driving water to surge against their ankles. "Tell them to seal off the domes connected to this tunnel." "What about you?" Ryan asked. "Someone can watch for me, and if there's time, they can let me through. I'm going to work up a temporary support to slow this down. Go!" Right. Wallace jumped into the little transport beside Ryan and flicked a switch. Bill just had a glimpse of Ryan's appalled face looking back at him as the transport lurched off down the tunnel the way they'd come. He turned and ran, splashing through deepening water, up to his shins now, to the idling gripper. He climbed into the cockpit, aware of the strengthening smell of brine and a kind of fog thickening in the tunnel. Mist rose from the swirling, swishing flood. In the dim light of the gripper cockpit, he found a series of switches, levers, a small steering wheel, a gear shift, an accelerator pedal. Bill flicked the toggle on the switch labeled grip, and the mechanical arms extended and opened their pincers in front of him, like a lobster warning off a rival. 2 levers jutting beside the steering wheel seemed to control the arms. The rising water was already seeping into the cockpit when he worked out how to manipulate the mechanical arms. Bill leaned out of the cockpit, peering upward into the muted light, and made out the spot he was looking for before another two overhead lights sparkled, sizzled, and went out. He shifted gears and drove the gripper forward a few yards, leaving a wake in the water behind him as cold brine gathered around his ankles. God, send the gripper mechanism doesn't short circuit before he could do the job. The sounds of metal creaking were becoming ominously loud. Bill took a deep breath and then manipulated the arms so that they bent at the nearest joints, angling sharply upward. He forced them hard against the ceiling, just where the water was spraying through, and the leak slackened. It was still coming, but not so fast. He noted a switch marked "Hold" and flicked it. The gripper's arms went rigid, holding in place. But already he could see the mechanical arms shivering, starting to buckle. Heart thudding, he clambered out quickly, knocking his head against the metal cockpit in his hurry. Bloody buggering fuck! Bill grabbed a spanner from the toolbox at the back of the gripper and hurried down the tunnel, splashing through the shadow towards the lights, the salt water above his knees now. Another squealing sound from behind. The sea was going to crash through and flood the tunnel. Damn quick, too. But he might have the leak slowed down just enough to see if Mr. Ryan got to safely. He wasn't optimistic about his own chances. Then he was in a lighted area of the tunnel, sloshing as fast as he could around the curve, and seeing a steel doorway up ahead in the recessed arch of the dome entrance. He splashed up to it, almost falling again. No window in this door, no intercom grid. The door was equipped with a wheel that could be used to open it, but he didn't dare unless they judged it safe. They'd have water pressure gauges. They'd know better than he would. He couldn't risk all those lives for his own. He'd brought the spanner to let them know he was there, and used it to bang hard on the door. He heard faint voices on the other side, but couldn't make out exactly what they were saying. It sounded like an argument. He looked over his shoulder and saw a wave rushing towards him along the tunnel. That was it then. He was done for. But he'd be toes up in no time. But then the door grated within itself and swung open. Water rushed past his knees into the dome. "No!" he shouted. "Close it! No time! Don't let the water in!" But strong arms were circling him, Ryan dragging him into the bright lights and human smells of the dome. Bill turned, and with Ryan and Wallace, took hold of the handle on the door and pulled. The water flow was with them, helping them slam the big metal door shut. They got it closed only a moment before the big wave rushing down the tunnel struck it with a dull booming. "Good Lord, but that was close," Wallace said, panting, as the water receded about their ankles. "Thank God you're safe, Mr. Ryan." Ryan turned to Bill, and they spontaneously shook hands, grinning at each other. "Don't thank God, Wallace," Ryan said. "Thank a man. Thank Bill McDonough." So now they've made it to the lighthouse of Rapture in 1947. It took them a little while to get there. It was a chilly, breezy, early evening as Andrew Ryan stepped off the launch. Ryan gestured for his bodyguards and coxswain to wait on the boat, then turned and climbed the steps of the great lighthouse structure. It was modeled on ancient descriptions of the lighthouse of Alexandria, and it radiated that classical majesty. He paused partway up to take it all in. Entrance by the tower, the surface entrance to Rapture. Oh, I need a back pop. Oh. Hello, people watching. Thanks for watching. He had ordained this. This was the manifestation of his will. "Welcome to Rapture," read the metal letters over the great round copper-plated Securus door. To either side of the Art Deco entrance rose streamlined chromium figures of men, statues built into the walls, looking as if they were supporting the building, their elongated, upraised arms straining for the heights. The door opened as he approached, and Chief Sullivan, smiling, emerged to shake his hand, along with a beaming Greavy, a wryly glum bearded Simon Wales, and Bill McDonough, looking a bit stunned. Ryan was glad Bill was here to see this. He had sensed doubts in Bill sometimes. Now Bill would see. They'd all see that the impossible was possible. Wales nodded to Ryan, barely managing a smile. I think you'll be pleased, Andrew. Oh, I think you'll be pleased, Andrew, he said in a mild Dublin accent. I think you'll be pleased, Andrew. Sure, we're nearly there. The architect wore a pea jacket, a black turtleneck sweater, and black trousers, his round, balding head shiny with perspiration, his bruised-looking eyes gleaming. They entered the high-ceilinged hexagonal chamber like the interior of a particularly grand observatory, their footsteps echoing on the marble floors. Intricately trimmed, picked out in precious metals, the entryway to Rapture had the spacious marble and gold gravitas of the Capitol building's rotunda, exactly as planned. Ryan felt a certain awe gazing up at himself, at the giant gold bust of Andrew Ryan looking gravely down at whoever entered this place. The expression was stern, but not angry. It expressed authority, but also objectivity. It gave notice. Rapture would tolerate only the worthy. The statue seemed oddly mute, however. He would add a banner to let people entering here know that they were on the brink of a new society where men were not cramped by the superstitions of big government. It would say no gods or kings, only man. He made a mental note of it. He would not forget, and why not have welcoming music playing for those entering the lighthouse? Perhaps an instrumental of La Mer, a whimsically pertinent song. Wales was talking about veneers and trim, certain endemic leakage issues that have Daniel quite concerned. But Ryan scarcely heard him. Wales was caught up in a designer's fixation on details, superficialities. It was the big picture that was thrilling, and gazing about himself now, Ryan was almost speechless with its power. Sullivan led the way to the bathysphere that would take them down the shaft of water, a kind of specialized elevator into Rapture herself. After you, sir, Sullivan said. Mouth dry with excitement, hands gently trembling, Ryan climbed into the bathysphere, the first transport in the Rapture metro. The others followed and took their places in the small craft, knees nearly touching. It was a bit crowded, but it didn't matter. The air crackled with anticipation. Too bad the bathysphere's television screen was blank at the moment. In time, it would show a short film. Welcome to Rapture, for those permitted secret immigration to the new undersea colony. Down they went, bubbles in the water-filled shaft streaming past them. The bathysphere's cable creaked, but the ride was comfortable. Run smooth as silk, this, Bill chuckled. Then they'd arrived at the first vantage, the lounge from which they'd view the city of Rapture. The bathysphere opened almost soundlessly. They climbed out of the bathysphere, and Ryan clapped Bill on the shoulder. Bill, you have been down here a lot more than I have. You have the best view. Lead the way. Simon Wales didn't seem pleased at that, but Bill had a great deal to do with the internal structure of Rapture. Got her guts and garters in me hands, he once said, and Ryan simply liked Bill McDonough better than Wales. Though his genius was undeniable, there was something subtly unstable about the glum, spade-bearded man, as if Simon Wales were always a heartbeat from a shout that never quite burst free. Bill grinned and made a sweeping "right this way" gesture. They struck off towards the big picture window to one side, where blue and green tinted light rippled across the floor. Ryan stepped up to the window and gazed out at Rapture. The marvel rose up before them, seeming almost a natural outgrowth of this aquatic world, as much a part of the planet as the Himalayas. Electrically illuminated canyons of steel and glass gleamed. Art Deco towers soared. Sunken buildings stood sturdily, dry inside. Watertight skyscrapers reared without a sky in sight to scrape. The lines of Rapture's magnificent architecture seemed to rocket towards the reticulating surface of the sea, some distance above, where light and shadow played tag. A school of golden-tailed fish swam by the window like a flock of birds, glittering as they passed. A raft of sea lions gamboled by up above, silhouettes near the surface. Base lights streamed colored rays up to the sides of the building, subtle reds and greens and purples, attiring the towering edifices in a royal splendor. It wasn't as impressive as the Grand Canyon or the Swiss Alps, but it was the work of a man. It took Ryan's breath away to look at it. Of course, it's not quite finished, but you see what man's will can do, Ryan said, his voice catching with emotion. In the distance down the street, crisscrossed the glass tunnels, an electric sign rippled with the gay life of an undersea Times Square. Ryan Enterprises. The first of many electric signs that would shine within the cold, dark sea. Billboards, neon signs, all the trappings of a truly free market would be found here, both inside and outside, a shining declaration of liberty and unrestrained enterprise. It's a wonder, is Rapture, Bill said huskily. One of the wonders of the world, adding with a touch of regret, pity most of the world won't know. Oh, in time they will, Ryan assured him. All who survive the destruction of the upper world, they will know Rapture. One day it will be the capital city of all civilization. You've done it, sir, Greavy declared, his voice trembling with an emotion he rarely showed. Wales glanced at Greavy. We've done it, all of us. Oh, it's not quite fully realized, Greavy, but it is alive, Ryan said glowingly. A new world, where men and women will stand up on their own 2 feet in the glory of competition. They will empower themselves with struggle. Bill said, but what about populating this miracle? Got to fill up all those buildings, Gov. So far, only a relatively few people lived in Rapture, mostly maintenance workers, engineers, some security. Ryan nodded and took a folded paper from his coat pocket. I've brought something along I wanted to share with you. He unfolded the paper and read it aloud. Letter of recruitment. He cleared his throat and went on. Tired of taxes? Tired of bullying governments, business regulations, unions, people expecting a handout from you? Want a new start? Do you have a skill, an ambition to be a pioneer? If you've received this notice, you've already been considered and selected to fill out an application for a life in Rapture. This amazing new enterprise will require immigration with an E. But it will cost you nothing except sweat and determination to come and take part in a new world. If our vetting team has done its job, you are not a trade unionist. You are a believer in free enterprise, competition, and carving your own path through the wildness of the world. There is room for up to 20,000 pioneers to thrive in this new society. We ask that you show this letter to no one, whatever your decision, if you're interested. Ryan shrugged and folded the letter. Just one of our recruiting tools, discreetly distributed. An early draft, of course. Rapture's not quite ready for the bulk of its population. Has Prentice Mill made any progress on his express? Ryan asked, turning to Wales. Wales grunted. Oh, that he has. 2 stations completed, a good deal of rail laid down. He's down in Sinclair Deluxe, supervising construction. He sniffed and drew a pipe from his coat, and then stuck it in his teeth, but didn't light it. Complains he needs more workers, of course. They all do. The Express is its own business, Ryan pointed out. Let him get busy and hire more workers himself. Those who are finished working on the outer shell can start on the rail. He turned to gaze on the window at Rapture again. Who knew how long it would take to grow, this almighty expression of his will that would continue proliferating in steel and glass and copper and rhenium, long after Andrew Ryan himself had passed away. All right, that was the end of part 1 of John Shirley's Rapture, based on BioShock 1 and 2. I hope that you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. I'm not going to be streaming anymore this week. Look for me to be streaming next week on Tuesday and Wednesday. And you can follow me on Twitter at Tympanic Pulse if you want to get a more up-to-date schedule for when I'm doing things. I'll usually post when I'm about to stream about an hour before. So follow me there. Follow me here if you enjoyed this today, and I hope to see you guys again. So stay safe out there, stay proud, stay loud, and I'll see you guys next time.